Ethan Cross's secondary heart skipped a beat as the colossal doors of the High Council chamber creaked open, their resonance reverberating through the vast hall, bouncing off the crystalline walls like an ominous warning. "By the 7 moons," he muttered under his breath, adjusting the intricate folds of his ceremonial robes. They actually came. The human delegation strode into the chamber, their demeanor laced with, was that amusement? Ethan Cross's sensor stalks twitched uneasily as he observed them from his elevated position among the Galactic Council members. These humans, barely a century into space travel, walked with the confidence of beings who believed they commanded the stars themselves. From her floating throne, High Chancellor Varathar rose, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with the carefully curated mix of diplomatic courtesy and authority. "Representatives of Earth," she announced, her translator working at full capacity to ensure the correct balance of welcome and command. Ambassador Olivia Parker, the lead representative of the human delegation, smiled, not the restrained, measured expression most species adopted for diplomatic functions, but something sharper, almost predatory. Behind her, Admiral Lucas Hayes stood motionless, his stoic composure rivaling that of a Drakari monk. "Oh, the pleasure is all ours, Chancellor," Olivia Parker replied, her tone carrying an undercurrent that sent a ripple of unease through Ethan Cross's chromatophories. "Though I must admit, your invitation was rather sudden." Minister Caleb Morgan, the third member of the human delegation, coughed lightly into his hand. Was that a chuckle? Ethan Cross's diplomatic instinct screamed that something about this entire scenario was deeply, dangerously off. Council member Maya Johnson, the representative of the Zephyr Collective, leaned forward on her anti-grav platform, her voice carrying the weight of barely concealed urgency. "Surely you grasp the magnitude of recent events, Ambassador Parker. The stability of 3 spiral arms is at stake." "Gravity," Olivia Parker echoed, exchanging a swift glance with Lucas Hayes. "An interesting choice of words, Counselor Johnson. Speaking of which, how's the situation in the Orion Spur? I understand your military installations there have been experiencing some instability with their artificial gravity generators." A murmur of alarm spread through the chamber like wildfire. Ethan Cross felt his scales bristle. How did they know about that? Those malfunctions were classified at the highest security level. Chancellor Vrathar's bioluminescence flickered erratically, a clear sign of unease to anyone familiar with the Thranthar body language. Perhaps we should remain focused on the matter at hand, the proposed peace accords. "Yes, let's," Admiral Lucas Hayes interjected for the first time, his voice smooth yet carrying an unmistakable edge like steel wrapped in silk. "Although, perhaps we can dispense with the pretense. We all know this gathering isn't about some newfound desire for peace with, what was it your last transmission called us? Ah, yes, a barely evolved primate species, meddling with technologies beyond their comprehension." Ethan Cross watched in horror as several council members involuntarily shifted colors, an involuntary reaction of shock. That transmission had been encrypted with the Cathar Dominion's most sophisticated quantum security protocols. The humans had now taken their designated seats, yet somehow, despite their physically lower position, they exuded an air of dominance over the chamber. Olivia Parker casually pulled out a paper notebook and a writing instrument, an unmistakable power move, as if implying this meeting wasn't even significant enough to merit digital records. She tapped her pen against the paper with a deliberate rhythm that seemed to drill into Ethan Cross's mind. "Well then," she said smoothly, "shall we begin?" Ethan Cross recalled the exact moment everything changed with painful clarity. 6 standard months prior, he had been delivering his routine surveillance report on newly emerging spacefaring species, standing before the council with confidence. The humans were meant to be nothing more than a minor footnote. "And as the monitoring data confirms," he had stated with certainty, "the Earth species remains confined to their own solar system. They are still grappling with basic antimatter containment, their primary focus directed toward Mars colonization and lunar developments, hardly a concern for another century at least." It was at that precise moment that the chamber's holoprojectors had bathed the room in flashing red alerts. Priority distress signals poured in through the emergency channels, quantum transmissions from 17 separate observation posts. "Impossible," Counselor Zralia had whispered, her ancient eyes wide with disbelief. "They can't have. No species develops quantum tunneling drives that quickly." And yet, the evidence unfolding before them was undeniable. Human ships, hundreds of them, were materializing simultaneously across Urathar Dominion space. Not crude experimental vessels tentatively testing the cosmic waters, but sleek, formidable predators, moving with an elegance that spoke of mastery. Perhaps, Minister Zaylor had ventured hesitantly, his tentacles coiling with unease. They've stumbled upon abandoned technology, some lost cache of ancient weaponry? Chancellor Varathar had cut in sharply. Unlikely. Observe their design aesthetics. Those ships are unmistakably human-engineered. This is no repurposed relic. Stunned silence had filled the chamber as they watched the impossible unfold. Human vessels displayed capabilities that should have taken millennia to develop. They phased effortlessly through solid matter, reversed entropy fields, and manipulated gravity as if it were child's play. We must establish contact immediately, Ethan Cross had urged, already formulating diplomatic protocols in his mind. We need to engage them before what, Ambassador? A voice, distinctly human, had cut through their secure communication lines, causing multiple council members to lose control of their anti-grav platforms. Olivia Parker's face had appeared on the primary display, her unsettling smile perfectly intact. Before we realize you've been watching us, studying us, deciding how best to deal with us? Even now, the memory sent an involuntary tremor down Ethan Cross's spinal ridges. The humans had known. They had known everything. Every observation post, every stealth satellite, every deep cover agent. They had allowed the Cathar Dominion to believe they remained blissfully unaware, all while preparing, building their forces in absolute secrecy. What followed had been 3 months of escalating diplomatic exchanges. The Cathar Dominion had attempted to position itself as a benevolent elder civilization, extending a guiding hand to humanity. The humans had responded with veiled amusement, subtle mockery, and increasingly implausible technological displays. We do appreciate the offer of mentorship, Admiral Lucas Hayes had remarked during their first formal meeting, sipping something called coffee with casual ease. But I think we've been managing just fine on our own. Well, on our own, Lucas Hayes had continued, his tone almost amused, though we'd be more than happy to discuss your recent attempts to infiltrate our quantum research facilities. The Urathar Dominion's immediate response had been to enact their long-prepared contingency protocols, activating a vast network of automated defense platforms that had encircled human space for over half a century. Silent sentinels meant to contain any potential threat from Earth. The humans had laughed, actually laughed. The moment those platforms went live, every weapon system, every shield generator, every supposedly impenetrable defense grid had simply ignored its programming. Target locks refused to engage. Fire control systems remained unresponsive. It was as if the very laws of physics had decided to take humanity's side. Did you honestly think, Trade Minister Caleb Morgan had asked during their second meeting, his tone dripping with mock curiosity, that we wouldn't notice? We've been using your defense platforms as navigation beacons for the last 10 years. Honestly, quite considerate of you to set up such an extensive network for us. The final blow had come when the humans unveiled their crowning achievement. They hadn't just mastered quantum tunneling. They hadn't merely bent gravity to their will. No, somehow they had learned to manipulate the fundamental constants of the universe itself. The revelation sent the Urathar Dominion's top scientists spiraling into near catatonic shock. It's really quite simple, Caleb Morgan had explained, his eyes gleaming with barely concealed amusement. Once you grasp that reality is more of a suggestion than a rule, the rest just falls into place. Now, as Ethan Cross watched the human delegation settle effortlessly into their seats, their casual confidence exuding an air of unshakable control, he couldn't suppress the creeping realization that the Urathar Dominion had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Their plan had been to contain humanity, to manage their expansion until proper controls could be imposed. Instead, it seemed they had unwittingly given them 50 uninterrupted years to perfect technologies that defied comprehension. Ambassador Cross? Olivia Parker's voice cut through his thoughts like a blade, snapping him back to the present. You seem distracted, she mused, tilting her head ever so slightly. Reminiscing about the past, perhaps? The knowing glint in her eyes made Ethan Cross's primary heart seize. Could they read minds as well? At this point, he wouldn't even be surprised. Chancellor Varathar activated the traditional negotiation crystals, their shifting light casting precisely calculated diplomatic patterns across the chamber. We shall begin with the primary points of contention, she announced, her voice regaining a measure of control. First, the matter of territorial boundaries. Actually, Olivia Parker interjected smoothly, reaching into her bag and producing a thermos. Would anyone care for some coffee? We brought plenty. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Admiral Lucas Hayes was already pouring, the rich, aromatic scent spreading through the ancient hall, completely ignoring the standard prohibitions against consuming anything during formal negotiations. This is highly irregular, Council Member Zoralia protested, her gaze narrowing. The sacred negotiation protocols explicitly state, "Oh, you mean the protocols written by the Zenth Empire?" Caleb Morgan interrupted, accepting a steaming cup from Lucas Hayes. Fascinating civilization. We stumbled upon their ruins on Proxima b just last week. Terrible shame about that quantum singularity accident 50,000 years ago. Chaos erupted. The fate of the Zenth Empire was one of the Urathar Dominion's most closely guarded secrets. Even among the Council, few knew the full truth. How? Ethan Cross started, but Olivia Parker silenced him with a dismissive wave. Please, Ambassador, she said lightly. Let's not waste time pretending there are any secrets left to keep. She gestured casually, and the holo projector flared to life, displaying a revised map of the galaxy. But something was off. These weren't minor adjustments. They were impossible. Sectors that should have taken days to traverse were now linked by near-instantaneous pathways. Strategic territories, once thought vital, were labeled as gravitationally unstable. As you can see, Lucas Hayes began, taking a leisurely sip of his coffee. We've taken the liberty of reorganizing things based on actual spatial topology rather than your outdated assumptions about physics. Minister Zahler's tentacles coiled in visible distress. These borders, he sputtered, violate every known principle of spatial dynamics. Known to you, Caleb Morgan corrected, flashing a polite smile. Did you know that space isn't actually continuous? It's more like a woven fabric, threads that can be pulled apart and reconnected at will. Here, let me show you. Before anyone could protest, Caleb Morgan withdrew what appeared to be an ordinary stylus from his pocket. With a seemingly effortless motion, he flicked it forward. The space between himself and the center of the chamber folded like paper. The sacred negotiation crystals flickered erratically as reality momentarily became optional. Cease this immediately! Chancellor Virathar's bioluminescence flashed in frantic warning patterns. This is a diplomatic conference, not a technology demonstration. Olivia Parker finished for her, arching an eyebrow. Are you sure? Because from our perspective, this seems more like a stalling tactic while your fleet repositions itself around the Orion Spur. She tapped a control on her wrist. A new hologram appeared, real-time fleet movements. Urathar Dominion warships, meticulously concealed with the most advanced stealth technology in the galaxy, were displayed in perfect clarity. Ethan Cross felt the color drain from his scales. Those ships were undetectable. Their locations should have been impossible to track. Interesting strategy, Lucas Hayes observed, scrutinizing the layout with mild interest. Although you might want to reconsider your dreadnought placements. Here, and definitely here. He gestured at multiple locations. Spatial topology gets a little unpredictable on Thursdays. Thursdays? Zoralia sputtered, incredulous. What does planetary rotation have to do with spatial topology? Oh, right. Caleb Morgan snapped his fingers as if he'd just remembered. You haven't discovered the link between temporal relativity and spatial geometry yet, have you? Tell you what. Let's throw in a basic primer as part of the peace deal. Consider it a goodwill gesture. A look of unfiltered horror passed between the council members. This wasn't just rapid technological advancement. The humans weren't just ahead of the Urathar Dominion. They were rewriting the fundamental laws of reality itself. Olivia Parker, unfazed by the growing panic, withdrew another set of documents from her briefcase. Now then, she continued smoothly, let's discuss your recent creative attempts to establish psychic influence over Earth's political leaders. The chamber went utterly still. I must say, she added, flipping through the papers, enhancing telepathic signals using quantum entanglement? Clever. Though perhaps you should have considered the possibility that we've been using your own quantum network as a backup communication system. Ethan Cross could do nothing but watch in mute horror as the carefully constructed diplomatic framework the Urathar Dominion had spent millennia refining crumbled around them. Every secret, every advantage, every meticulously crafted contingency, reduced to irrelevance by these humans who now sat across from them, smiling, who treated universal laws like optional suggestions. This is outrageous, Chancellor Varathar declared, rising from her throne, her bioluminescence flickering wildly. You cannot simply disregard established cosmic principles. Actually, Lucas Hayes corrected, setting down his empty coffee cup with deliberate ease. We've found that cosmic principles can be quite flexible, once you know how to ask them nicely. It's remarkable what reality is willing to accommodate when you take the time to understand its preferences. Its preferences? Ethan Cross found himself asking before he could stop himself, and immediately regretted it. Oh, absolutely, Caleb Morgan responded with barely contained enthusiasm. Reality is surprisingly cooperative, once you stop forcing it into rigid mathematical boxes. But I suppose that's a bit advanced for a civilization still convinced causality only flows in one direction. Olivia Parker reached into her briefcase and pulled out another document. This one covered in what appeared to be childlike sketches. Now, about your secret research facilities in the Kina Nebula. She stood, placing both hands on the ancient negotiation table, her voice growing sharper. Before we continue this charade any further, there's something you should probably be aware of. The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees as she withdrew a small, unassuming black cube from her pocket. Do you know what this is? Ethan Cross leaned forward, his sensor stalks twitching. It looked like an ordinary carbon composite, nothing extraordinary at a glance. And yet, something about it sent every instinct in his body screaming danger. A human storage device? Chancellor Varathar suggested, attempting to maintain a veneer of diplomatic control. Admiral Lucas Hayes chuckled. Close, but not quite. He gestured toward Olivia Parker, who tilted the cube slightly in her palm. It's actually a containment unit, she said. Inside is a complete copy of your civilization's quantum network. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the faint hum of the chamber's gravity generator seemed to hesitate. Impossible, Counselor Zoralia whispered, her voice barely audible. The quantum network is distributed across 11 dimensions. You can't simply copy it. Can't we? Caleb Morgan asked, pulling out a second identical cube. This one contains your backup network. You know, the one you thought was safely hidden in that pocket universe? Turns out pocket universes have back doors, if you know where to look. Ethan Cross's scales rippled in waves of sheer terror. The quantum network was everything. It held the combined knowledge of every species in the Urathar Dominion, their research, their defense codes, their genetic archives, their planetary shield frequencies. It was the very backbone of their civilization. You're bluffing, Chancellor Varathar said, though the dimming of her bioluminescence betrayed her fear. Olivia Parker simply shrugged and pressed a small button on the cube. Instantly, every piece of technology in the chamber shut down. The anti-grav platforms, the translation systems, even the artificial gravity, all dead. As council members scrambled to regain their balance, Olivia Parker remained perfectly composed. That was just a small demonstration, she explained, watching as they struggled to right themselves. We only shut down non-essential systems in this sector. Would you like to see what happens when we access your defense grid protocols? Wait, Ethan Cross found himself shouting. This is madness. You would risk the stability of the entire galaxy? Lucas Hayes arched an eyebrow. Risk? Ambassador, we're preventing a catastrophe. His expression hardened. Your council was preparing to launch a preemptive strike against Earth in exactly 47 minutes. Did you really think we wouldn't notice the quantum torpedoes you've been positioning through subspace? The chamber exploded into chaos. Most council members hadn't even been aware of the quantum torpedo program. It had been developed in absolute secrecy, a weapon of last resort. How long? Chancellor Vrathar's voice was barely a whisper. How long have you had access to the network? Caleb Morgan casually checked his watch. From your linear perspective, about 30 years. We discovered your first monitoring post near Pluto, traced it back to your quantum network, and well, one thing led to another. Though given the nature of quantum time manipulation, the actual timeline is a bit more complicated. What do you want? Zoralia demanded, her ancient composure finally cracking. Olivia Parker's smile was devoid of humor. What we've always wanted. No interference, no manipulation, no attempts to control our development. We're willing to maintain diplomatic relations, engage in fair trade, even share some of our discoveries once you're ready for them. She placed both cubes on the table, her expression turning cold. Consider these a guarantee of good behavior. Leave us in peace, and they remain inactive. If you don't, Ethan Cross could scarcely believe what he was hearing. You would hold an entire civilization hostage? Lucas Hayes scoffed. Hostage? Says the civilization that's been pointing planet-killing weapons at Earth for the last 50 years? The difference is, we're giving you a choice. Olivia Parker's voice darkened. You have 46 minutes to recall those quantum torpedoes. After that, she let the implication hang in the air before reaching into her bag once more. Well, let's just say we found some fascinating applications for quantum network manipulation. Her expression remained perfectly neutral, but Ethan Cross felt a deep, bone-chilling dread take hold. Did you know, she continued, her voice deceptively light, that it's possible to retroactively adjust probability matrices? Imagine an entire civilization suddenly having made slightly different choices at key moments throughout history. The implications hit Ethan Cross like a gravitational wave. They weren't just threatening the present, they were threatening the past itself. Olivia Parker glanced at her watch. 42 minutes. She folded her hands neatly in front of her. Shall we end this charade now, or would you prefer to wait until the very last possible second? The chamber was deathly silent. Chancellor Vruthar's bioluminescence had dimmed to near nothing, a telltale sign of profound distress among her species. The council must confer, she said at last, her voice hollow. This decision cannot be made unilaterally. Of course, Caleb Morgan said, gathering his papers. Though I should mention, we've locked your quantum communication systems. A pause. You'll have to discuss this the old-fashioned way, face-to-face. Panic set in. Without their quantum link, council members couldn't access their neural networks, couldn't pull up vast stores of diplomatic protocols, couldn't even contact their homeworlds. This is barbaric, Zralia cried, her ancient hands trembling. You cannot expect us to make such a momentous decision without proper consultation. Admiral Lucas Hayes straightened his uniform. Fascinating, he mused. When you planned to annihilate Earth, did you consult anyone? Or did you simply decide we were too dangerous to be allowed to exist? That was different, Ethan Cross protested, his voice raw. We saw the signs, your rapid technological growth, your warlike history, your unpredictable nature. No, Olivia Parker cut him off sharply. You saw what you wanted to see, a younger species advancing faster than you could control, faster than you thought we should. And that terrified you, Olivia Parker continued, her voice cutting through the thick silence. Instead of extending a hand in genuine friendship, you chose to watch us from the shadows. Instead of open dialogue, you opted for subversion, and when all else failed, you planned genocide. She turned away from the stunned faces of the council and walked to the massive window overlooking the galaxy, its spiraling arms stretching endlessly into the void. 37 minutes, she murmured, gazing at the stars. Then, glancing back over her shoulder, she added, Would you like to know something interesting about humans, Chancellor Varathar? We're actually quite peaceful by nature. Curious? Certainly. Sometimes chaotic, sure. But above all, we prefer cooperation over conflict. Your history suggests otherwise, Zralia countered, her voice laced with skepticism. Our history suggests we learn from our mistakes, Lucas Hayes corrected, his tone unwavering, which is more than I can say for your Urathar dominion. For all your age and wisdom, you seem remarkably bad at it. Caleb Morgan, ever the picture of casual indifference, had begun packing away their coffee supplies. You know what the real irony is? He mused. If you had approached us openly from the start, shared your knowledge freely, we would have gladly joined your Urathar dominion. Humans love being part of something bigger than themselves. But instead, Olivia Parker continued, you chose fear, and now you're dealing with the consequences of that choice. 33 minutes. Chancellor Varathar exhaled sharply, her bioluminescence flickering erratically. Then at last she spoke. Stop. Her voice wavered. I will give the order to stand down. All weapons. Lucas Hayes remained unmoved. Including the bioweapon facilities in the Carina Nebula, the time dilation bombs near Alpha Centauri, the reality anchor you've been constructing around Sol. A ripple of shock passed through the council. Many members visibly recoiled. The look of dawning horror on their faces confirmed that most of them hadn't even known about these projects. Their own leadership had been keeping secrets from them. Varathar closed her eyes. Yes, she whispered, all of them. Olivia Parker nodded, satisfied. Good choice. She tapped the cubes on the table lightly. These stay with us, of course. Consider them insurance against any future misunderstandings. She turned to leave, but then paused at the threshold. Oh, and one last thing, she said over her shoulder. That primitive antimatter containment technology you thought we were struggling with? We solved that problem centuries ago. Everything you've been watching, all the technological hurdles you assumed we were desperately trying to overcome? Theater. We wanted to see how our neighbors would react. Now we have our answer. The human delegation strode toward the chamber doors, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Just before they exited, Olivia Parker glanced back one final time. "We'll send proper diplomatic representatives next week to establish normal relations," she said. "Until then, I suggest you reconsider your approach to emerging civilizations. After all," her lips curved into something that was almost a smile, "we can't be the only ones who've been playing along with your observations." The doors swung shut behind them with a resounding boom. For a long time, no one spoke. Ethan Cross surveyed the chamber, his gaze passing over the faces of his fellow council members. What he saw reflected in their expressions was the same thing coursing through his own body. Not just fear, not just humiliation, a realization far more profound. They hadn't simply miscalculated humanity's capabilities. They had misunderstood their place in the galaxy. They were not the benevolent overseers guiding primitive species toward enlightenment. They were the ones being watched, being tested, and they had failed. The chamber remained silent for precisely 10 minutes after the humans left. Ethan Cross counted every second, mainly because the timekeeping systems were still offline. At last, Chancellor Varathar broke the silence, her voice hollow. "The quantum torpedoes have been recalled. All of them." Zoralia swallowed hard. "How many?" she asked, almost dreading the answer. "How many weapons did we actually have locked onto Earth?" Varathar's eyes dimmed further. 2,734. Enough firepower not just to destroy the planet, but to erase its entire star system from existence. Ethan Cross felt his scales ripple in a wave of nausea. "And they knew," he whispered. A junior aide burst into the chamber, panting, a crumpled document clutched in his trembling hands. "Chancellor," he gasped, "we found something in the physical archives. Something about the humans." The parchment was impossibly old, its script written in the language of the first species, being so ancient that most of their records had been lost to time. As Varathar read, her bioluminescence shifted to a shade Ethan Cross had never seen before. According to the text, humanity was not emerging into space. They were returning to it. The revelation hit the chamber like a quantum wave collapse. The script spoke of a species that had long ago reached technological singularity, a civilization that had mastered the cosmos so completely that they had made an impossible decision: to start over. To erase their advancements, to wipe away their own knowledge and begin again, not out of necessity, not out of desperation, but for fun. "Why?" Zoralia whispered. "Why go through all of that?" Before anyone could answer, the chamber's main display flickered to life. A new message had appeared. Text only. Their holographic systems were still rebooting. Because the journey is more interesting than the destination. Because watching your reactions was genuinely entertaining. Because sometimes, the best way to understand younger civilizations is to become one. Don't worry too much about the quantum network. We'll give you back full access once you've learned to play nice with others. Sincerely, humanity. P.S. The coffee was real. We do actually love coffee. Ethan Cross stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process the sheer scope of what had just happened. How many other supposedly primitive species were actually ancient civilizations in disguise? How many others had been playing the Urathar Dominion this entire time? The humans hadn't just walked away from peace talks, they had walked away from the entire cosmic stage, leaving the Urathar Dominion to grapple with a terrifying new reality. They had never been the advanced ones. In the distance, through the chamber's massive window, a star winked out of existence, then reappeared a few seconds later. Someone gasped. "Just showing off now," Varathar muttered. And for the first time in the long, storied history of the Urathar Dominion,